Barakim Habarim. Welcome to Messianic Moment Ministries. I'm Stephen Bruck. You know who you are, and today is April Fool's Day. No fooling. So, we now begin to move from the laws of kashrut in the book of Leviticus to the laws of cleanliness. These two chapters in today's Parashah cover the topic of cleanliness for a woman after giving birth and for tzara'at, which is leprosy, even though actually it could mean some other form of skin disease or even some type of mold. Without going into all the details, women become unclean ceremonially after giving birth by means of the bodily secretions that occur as a result of the birth. God says that you're unclean if you have bodily secretions. And there were two different time periods that she had to wait before she was able to make a sacrifice and become cleansed, and that depended upon whether she gave birth to a boy or to a girl. Now, the next chapter, the rules for tzara'at, and they're also very detailed. Essentially, the person goes to the Kohen to be inspected if they have any kind of sores or boils or anything. Then they clean themselves and they're separated from the camp for a week. After the 7 days, they go back for an inspection. These rules also apply to any clothing that had tzara'at, except instead of going outside the camp, you just lock the clothing up. Duh. If the boils or sores do not go away, that person is then declared unclean and remains separated outside the main camp until such time, if any, the sores disappear. If the clothing it doesn't appear to be cleaned of the disease after it's been washed and put away, they burn it. Now, if the sores do disappear down the road, the process of inspection, waiting period, and reinspection happen all over again. This time, though, if the Kohen determines the disease is gone, the person cleans him or herself, performs a sacrifice, and then is allowed back into the society. Okay, now, there are two main arguments for why we have these regulations. There's the hygienic argument and the Levitical argument. Now, the hygienic argument is that these rules were given by God in order to maintain the general health of the population, keeping people from becoming infectious and possibly causing a plague. Now, I can understand God wanting to prevent someone from causing a plague. I mean, reading the Tanakh, it seems to me that plagues are one of God's favorite punishments, and I don't blame him for not wanting to share that with some mere human. Now, the Levitical argument is that the rules and regulations about cleanliness are religious in nature, dealing more with spiritual defilement than physical sickness. Those who were unclean were forbidden from entering the sanctuary because their physical uncleanliness would also represent their spiritual uncleanliness, which would defile the sanctuary. God is very clear throughout the Torah that only those who were clean could come into his presence. Now, these two apparently opposing arguments are in fact not exclusive, but inclusive. Being infected with a contagious disease is a really good reason to be separated from the population, and as such, not allowed into the sanctuary where people are gathered in prayer. And even when cleansed of the physical disease, the sacrifice is required to bring that person back into spiritual communion with God after having been physically separated from God's presence in the sanctuary. So what does it come down to? If I am muddy, I am dirty, but does that make me unclean according to the Torah? No, it doesn't, but you should clean up before going to shul, that's for sure. The clean and unclean regulations did not apply so much to everyday living, but to being allowed into the sanctuary. They were designed not just to help maintain a healthy population, but to also prevent any defilement of the holy things. Holiness means to be separated. The holy separated from the common, and in the same manner, the spiritually clean is separated from the spiritually unclean. Now, God tells us what he considers to be clean and unclean, and if we do not want to be separated from God, then we need to understand the difference and how to be cleansed when we become unclean. Now, through Yeshua, the need to bring an animal to the sanctuary to present as a sacrifice is no longer necessary, but we still need to obey the laws. So if you have a bodily secretion, wash yourself, change your clothes, then in the evening, which for Jews, of course, is the next day, you will be clean and can go to the temple. However, if you're a woman in your time of nidah, which is during your menstrual cycle, technically you should not go to your house of worship until after the cycle is completed and you bathe in accordance with the rules in this Parashah. Now note, the bath that men and women take in order to become ceremonially clean is called the mikvah. The baptism, which is not a ceremonial cleansing but a physical representation of a spiritual change, is called a tevilah. Yochanan the Immerser, John the Baptist, had people undergo a tevilah, not a mikvah. By the way, do you know why Orthodox men will not shake hands with a woman or take something from her hand? It's because they don't know if she is in her time of nidah. It is not a form of abasement or disrespect. It is simply self-protection, because if she is unclean, then touching her or even taking something from her will transmit her uncleanliness to them. Now look, whether you or not you obey these rules, it's up to you. Just as it is really with anything God says we should do in the Torah. But if you decide to ignore them, remember this. God didn't give us the Torah so we could ignore it or pick and choose what we wanted to do. And Yeshua never told anyone to ignore anything his Father said to do. God gave us commandments to live by. In Deuteronomy 28, he promises to bless us when we obey, and that we will be cursed when we disobey. Just a little something to think about next time someone tells you that you don't have to do any of that Jewish stuff. Well, thank you for being here. And please share these messages with everyone you know. Subscribe to my website. There's a subscribe button in the right-hand margin. YouTube here, one of these icons somewhere. You click on, you subscribe. The different lists, but we don't sell them out. Don't worry about that. And when you're on the website, please check out and buy my books. And on Facebook, I have a discussion group called Just God's Word. Please find it, join it, but make sure you read and agree to the rules. And that, my friends, is it for this week. So, Lihitrot and Shabbat Shalom.